What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And today, yes, you heard right, it is another Hey Chris episode. And of course, that means Chris Fedor is back joining us from the beautiful state of Ohio before his flight to Charlotte. What a treat we have for you guys today to get into a lot of the different questions from our subtext subscribers. Also joining us, Jimmy Watkins. But of course, to be able to get different insight directly to your phone, you can sign up to subtext $3.99 a month, 14 days free. This is a subscription-based service that you can get that allows you to have tapped-in information and knowledge directly to your phone from me, Chris, and Jimmy about everything relating to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and especially the most beautiful thing, we take you behind the scenes and things that not necessarily go on the social media platforms such as X, Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. Subtext gets this information first and gets a little bit more detailed because we know about the character discussion and all those things. But I want to get into these questions from our subtexters for today. And the first one we're going to knock out. And Chris, we talked a little bit about some of the nicknames that have been circulating this Cavs team as of late. Me and Jimmy were not big fans of them. But a new nickname that has been dropped into our inbox for Evan Mobley, because we talked about how he's been called the predicament as of late. Even Dan Gilbert tweeted it out last night saying that he was going up against the Automatopoeia, who is Bam Adebayo, apparently.
Don't forget the skeleton key. I came up with the skeleton key last night for Evan.
He sure did. But the next nickname that we got from a subtexter for Evan Mobley is the Evolution. Evolution? Like it? Yeah, I think it. I'm not mad at it. Chris, what do you think about the nickname debacle that is going on for this Cavs team? Do you think players necessarily need a nickname? It feels like a lot of these have been forced. What's your take on the situation?
Well, look, I mean, if a nickname fits a guy and it becomes something that helps them with their marketing, then I'm all for it, because this is, at the end of the day, is an entertainment business. And, you've got the Beard and James Harden, you've got King James and LeBron, you've got the Alien and Wemby. Like, when they are fitting, the Black Mamba with Kobe back in the day, when they are fitting and when they become synonymous with the guy and they actually take off, they can be really, really good. I don't mind the evolution. There's something that the Cavs were doing a couple of years ago with EV4 with Evan Mobley because of like one of the cars. I don't remember which car it was, but there was like a fancy car that was released, a more modern one, and it was an EV4 of some kind. So they were doing something with the EV4. They were trying to workshop that a little bit. But it has to be organic and it has to kind of catch on. I don't know that the skeleton key, Jimmy, is going to catch on when it comes to Evan Mobley. And the other thing with nicknames is, like, there can't be this huge backstory to them. You have to hear them and you have to say, that makes sense. Totally understand why. When you have to go into detail explaining why the nickname is what it is, then it becomes a little bit more complicated. When it comes to Evan, like, I've actually leaned on Slim Duncan myself in the past. Tim Duncan, but Slim. I think that's pretty fitting for somebody like Evan. But I do agree that somebody with his stature into the future will probably require a nickname to kind of get his notoriety to a different place than what it is right now.
Slim Duncan, down to the disposition. That one fits. Evan, right? Like,
yes,
isn't Evan like, are we going to be doing a big time profile on what's the famous Tim Duncan story where there's a Sports Illustrated Tim Duncan story where it's just all about how boring he is. And like, that's like in and of itself interesting, like a real galaxy brain kind of idea there. That I like a lot. And I also, if you're a Cavs fan, a nickname debacle, being the biggest problem on your hands, not bad. Not bad through 62 games.
I'm trying to see what his basketball reference has listed because
I think
it
nothing.
doesn't have anything listed.
Yeah, it's
for a
got
nickname.
nothing.
Nothing at all.
What
But
do
there
we-
are some of these on basketball reference that are just out of nowhere. And you're like, wait a minute. Like, I've never heard the guy referred to as that. So I was wondering if there was anything that caught on with Evan. And there is nothing at this point in time. Maybe I'll ask a bunch of his teammates if he has some. I will say that, Tristan Thompson is well known in the Cavs locker room for coming up with creative nicknames and giving them to people. He was the one who has assigned Dean Wade the nickname that Dean Wade has, that I have a story coming out on in the next week or so. I'm not revealing the nickname now. It is not happening. But it is classic. And it is a very Tristan Thompson-esque nickname. When you hear the nickname, you're like, okay, there's no way that anybody else other than Tristan Thompson gave Dean Wade that nickname. But I'm not revealing it right now. It is going to come out in a couple of days, and it is very fitting to the defense-first style of Dean Wade. Let's just put it that way.
You've been teasing this story for like a month now. I was so excited when you first talked about it. You were like, oh, I just got this inside scoop from talking to Tristan and Dean Wade. And because this was like something that Kenny Atkinson had brought up in a post-game press conference. He was like, you guys are going to have to do the inside research.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, this is a story that Chris is going to delve into. And you were like, okay, it might come out this weekend. It was like Wednesday at this point. I'm like, okay, Chris, I'm waiting. And I was like, okay, he's going to tell us now. The story's going to come out tomorrow. It's going to be a great preface. All of these things. No, got to wait another week.
Wade. Blame Dean. He got hurt.
That's fair. That's
I want to drop it when a guy's injured and he's out of sight, out of mind. I had to wait for him to come back, and I had to figure out what his role was going to be with the new look Cavs. So it was ready to drop. I was going to go with it, and then Dean got sidelined. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, this is the second time that I've put together this big Dean Wade feature that has been interrupted by a knee injury of Dean Wade.
Dean Wade injured. Huh. Never. That's news to me. I'm just glad that we have Chris on the case in all of these cases, but particularly this weekend in Charlotte, because I saw a report this morning that LaMelo Ball might want to playing in a winning environment. He might be exploring trade options this summer, and I need Chris to investigate why LaMelo Ball hasn't been in a winning environment yet. It could be. It's probably a lot of factors that have to do with something other than LaMelo Ball. I'm certain of it. Which is why I'm glad that we'll have Chris with boots on the ground.
Speaking of traveling to different cities, and before I even get into this, I just sent an Instagram video to both of your phones, and I would like you to watch it while I set this question up for Chris.
Homework during the pod? Homework during the pod.
It's not work. It is hilarious. It is a basketball, because we talked about the basketball reference page as having random nicknames. This is one of them. We mentioned it yesterday. It's Ty Jerome's milk nickname, and all of the rookies of this class were going through and trying to figure out who this man was. But here's the next question for Chris, and we'll circle back to this video in a second because I absolutely loved it. I had to dive deep into the internet verse to figure out what was going on. But Chris, you're muted, but I want to set this next question up. From Dave in Tucson. He says, because Chris loves traveling and is such a foodie, the Cavs will likely be matched up with a team from the play-in tournament, Miami, Orlando, Atlanta, or Chicago. I would like to know which city Foodie Chris, Fedor, would prefer to eat in a 4-day playoff trip. Rank all 4 cities and what had his go-to cuisine plan for that winning, I think he meant to say weekend, might be. 3+
I thought
days.
You said this was going to be a shorter
meals,
pod,
please.
Ethan. I thought you said this was going to be a shorter pod. We're going to make this 2 episodes.
Wait, the 4 are Orlando, Miami. So this is complicated because I don't only pick these cities. So everybody, for those that don't know, my rooting interest when it comes to the end of the season is simply for playoff matchups that are favorable for me. Where do I want to go in the playoffs? So last year it was hilarious on press row. It was me, Joe Varden, Ethan, Danny Cunningham, Ryan Lewis, and all these other guys. And we're not paying attention at all to the Cavs game in any sort of way. It was just scoreboard watching the rest of the NBA because we had this list of destinations that we wanted to go to. And I forget which ones were in the running, but I believe Milwaukee was in the running. And like nobody wants to go to Milwaukee for the playoffs. I'm sorry. They just don't. Not if you're from Cleveland. Cleveland is Milwaukee. Milwaukee is Cleveland. It's the Spider-Man meme, basically. So Milwaukee was in the running. Orlando was in the running. But it felt like Orlando was kind of like a long shot where a bunch of different things had to happen in the NBA. And then they all were happening. And we were all looking at each other like, oh my God, is this going to happen? Are we going to get Orlando instead of Milwaukee? Are we going to get golf instead of a food hall? Are we going to be able to get sunshine instead of whatever it's going to be in Milwaukee? So they all unfolded, and we got Orlando in round one, and then Boston in round two, and it was like the greatest playoff setup that you could have, aside from maybe like Milwaukee, Boston, New York, or something like that. You know what I mean? So there are these different markets that are just more beneficial for a reporter. And that's what we root for. We root for us. But when it comes to these cities, yeah, part of it's the food. But the other part of it is the nightlife. The other part of it is what kind of activities you can do in these cities. The other part of it is what hotels are going to be available because some hotels are just better than others. So this is no offense to you, Ethan, or Georgia, but like Atlanta is so far down that list. It is so far down that list that I don't even want to consider the possibility of Atlanta, Cleveland being the 1-8 matchup. Like there is nothing appealing about me going to Atlanta for a playoff series. I've done it already. I hate the airport. They don't really have the restaurants that are that much different. Like they do have a Quiznos, and I love that about Atlanta. They do have a barbecue place called Fox Brothers. I love that as well. But it's not like a restaurant scene that stands out above some of these other markets. So I was actually having this conversation with Joe Varden in Boston when we were sitting down for lunch recently, Joe Varden of The Athletic. And we were talking about our preferred destinations for the playoffs. And we both agreed, because we are golf nuts, that Orlando, Miami, one of those two needs to be at the top of any list. I like Chicago. I like the food in Chicago. I like the nightlife in Chicago. I like the hotel situation in Chicago. I like other things about Chicago. So I would probably have it Orlando, Miami, 1-2, then Chicago, and then Atlanta 16.
You didn't have to say Atlanta, but I think Atlanta.
Those were the four options, right?
Yeah, those are the four options. I'm just saying. I think I have my favorite.
In my world, I'm hoping that the Brooklyn Nets overtake the Atlanta Hawks because the first round in New York is a lot better than Atlanta to me.
Brooklyn pizza. That's the only thing on Chris's mind. He does not care about anything else.
Broadway shows, New York style pizza, my burger joint called JG Mellon, other things that you can do in New York.
Fair. Okay. Jimmy, if you had to pick your or rank your four spots, where you at?
Ethan taking offense to my Atlanta blast. He's defending Atlanta.
Hey man, I got Atlanta roots, man. I might not be from Atlanta, but I sure have had family there my whole life. But
in fact, anyway, can we find a way to get the tanking Toronto Raptors? Can RJ Barrett have like the last month of a season that we've never seen before from a player? Can he just lead the Toronto Raptors into the 8th seed so that I can get my ass back to Toronto for the first round playoff series. That would be magical. Come on, RJ. Come on, Scotty Barnes.
The Grady Dick injury.
Come on, Grady Dick.
Tough timing for the Grady Dick injury. It's the Raptors are just about to make their push to satisfy Chris's travel needs. I think we've already. I have been to all these places. I like all these places. I don't think I'm going to. People don't care what I think about these places. My nickname is not Foodie Fedor. My nickname is not Foodie Fedor. So I'm withdrawing myself from the conversation.
All right, changing the gears a little bit, but I want to circle back before we get into some real basketball talk for about 10 minutes. What did you guys think about?
What's that?
What did you guys think about the video that I sent you about Ty Jerome's not nickname, because he does not like that nickname, but apparently it's kind of known and has been referenced on Basketball Reference, ironically enough.
Yeah, I just looked up his Basketball Reference page, and it does list his nickname as Milk. I don't know where that came from. That feels... How can I say this? Part of the nickname feels like there's a deeper origin story attached to it. The other part of the nickname is very self-explanatory. I think Ty has kind of emerged in the conversation for Sixth Man of the Year, where he needs something a little bit better than just Milk as a nickname, if we're going to go with that. I don't know about Chill Guy Ty. I know Cavs fans are kind of workshopping that one. His teammates call him Chill Guy. You know, the Cavs social media is all about Chill Guy Ty. I'm not sure that I love that one specifically, but it does fit his demeanor in most cases. He's just somebody who doesn't give a bleep about anything. He doesn't care about the comments that he makes post-game. He doesn't care if he's blasting officials. There was actually a hilarious moment in Chicago the other night following the game where Darius and Ty were having a conversation about something, and I think Darius said, "You want to bet." It was something that they were talking about. It was a friendly competition, and Darius said, "You want to bet?" And Ty's like, "Sure, we'll wager $25,000 to obviously cover the fine that he received for the comments that he made." But it just goes back to, this dude has no filter. He doesn't care about anything. He just sits there in his chair post-game, soaking his feet, and he's an open book. And even on the floor, like, nothing seems to bother him in any sort of way. He doesn't get rattled. He's cool, calm out there on the floor when he's not talking trash with the other team. So there just isn't a situation that you could put Ty in where he's going to be faced. So from that standpoint, the Chill Guy Ty kind of fits. It also rhymes, and I guess that's sort of cool-ish. But I don't know. I feel like he's more... I think he deserves, based on the year that he's had and the conversations that he's going to be in at the end of the season, I think he deserves something better for a nickname than just Milk.
Yeah, and I think the funniest thing is,
can I make
you
the
mentioned
case
Tristan
for Milk?
Thompson giving.
Can I make the case for Milk real quick?
Yes, please.
Hold on. Before you do this, hold on, Jimmy. 2 seconds. Give me 2 seconds. Before you make the case for Milk, Tristan Thompson tried giving Ty Jerome the nickname the Microwave. We obviously had to scrap that one because it's a formerly used nickname. But if I had to pitch a nickname and it wasn't Chill Guy Ty, which I kind of like, he has this new signature kind of celebration where he's like freeze. Him and Darius Garland love that celebration. There's like pictures all over social media of Darius, even in like the traveling van or the traveling bus that they have doing the celebration. So Mr. Freeze, I don't know. I think that would kind of be hard, but go ahead, Jimmy.
That's
Milk.
taken. That's taken by a superhero or a villain, right?
Come on.
Is it a villain?
It's Batman.
Yeah,
Batman
but
I've
villain.
got to be really up on my superheroes these days. My son
Batman
has
villain.
reached a superhero phase,
Oh,
and he wants to know what every single one's superpowers is, and he wants to know what every single one, their origin story and their real name and stuff like that. In fact, the other day I was reading him a story about Captain Marvel, and I was flipping through the pages and they had pictures, and I said, whoa, she's a hottie. So for the next like couple hours, my son Elliot's walking around the house saying, whoa, she's a hottie. She's a hottie. Mommy, Daddy said Captain Marvel's a hottie.
Alex can get you in trouble, man.
I was gonna say.
Go ahead
Okay.
and make your
Okay,
case.
wait.
Go
Now
ahead
I
and
have a
make your case
superhero.
to me.
I have a superhero point to make real quick. When I was a kid, probably around Elliot's age, I was Batman. Notice I did not say I was into Batman. I was Batman to the point where I wore full-fledged Batman costume, mask, utility belt, shirt depicting the Batman chest plate multiple times per week. And one day, my mother took me to the library, and I kicked my passenger door open as Batman would, because when he was in a hurry to fight some crime, and I absolutely tattooed the car next to us. Lo and behold, in that very same moment, owner of said car is walking out of the library and just gave my mom a stern talking to about how to patrol her child, tried to cut a deal so that I could repay for that car dent with chores around her house. Like, bro, I'm 3. What do you think I'm going to get accomplished for you? Anyways, the case for milk. I forgot this was we're talking basketball here. The case for milk, as Ty Jerome's nickname, is the versatility of the nickname, right? So maybe at the beginning of Ty Jerome's season, he's 2% milk because we're not sure how much he's going to play. Now, as he's leveling up, in his transformation phase where he's focused on his body and getting in the weight room, he's oat milk or almond milk, healthier versions of the the cold sweet drink.
No.
And then as he graduates into Super Saiyan Ty Jerome, he could be whole milk. When he gets really hot at the end of fourth quarters and he's putting a team to bed, you give them a glass of warm milk, maybe put it in the microwave for a little bit to work with Tristan there a little bit. And the best part, just to wrap it all home, is that a lot of people out there, despite all of the wholesome dairy fueled bucket getting that Ty Jerome is showing us right now, some people, not this podcast, but some people still believe that there is an expiration date on this glass of milk we're drinking for Ty Jerome right now. That's the case for milk.
That becomes a little bit too complex.
It does not pass the blink test. We were saying last night, it's just kind of like you know it or you don't. I agree with you.
That's right.
I just had fun. I had fun doing that right there.
I'm glad we could have fun on this podcast. Of course, that is what it is for. And I feel like we get into so many different nicks and crannies of the basketball season that we have to have one of these podcasts every once in a while to show people that we are human. We aren't just robots. But I do want to finish the podcast because I know we got to get out of here with one basketball question from our subtexters that references us being into the nicks and crannies of the basketball season. Comes from Billy in Brooklyn, who says, the pods act like Jalen Brunson is far and away the clutch player of the year. Can one of you nerds look at DG's clutch numbers and make a case? Sure. Here you go. Darius Garland has the best field goal percentage in the clutch for the 2024-2025 NBA regular season at 59.5%. The Cleveland Cavaliers have the most wins in clutch games, I believe, in the NBA this season. Shall I continue?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Darius is in the mix. He's in the conversation. I don't know that he's the front runner. I think Jalen Brunson has a case. I think Trae Young has a case. I believe De'Aaron Fox has won Clutch Player of the Year in the past. He has a case as well. He's really good in clutch situations. Believe it or not, Jason Tatum, I think, has a case as well, even though he doesn't have that same kind of reputation. But yeah, Darius is in that mix. It's only March 6th, though. There's still a month to go in the regular season, and what is today may not be when voting is actually done. So I think it's still open. Jalen Brunson, like I said, Trae Young's really good in clutch situations. Really good in clutch situations. Speaking of nicknames, Ice Trae, like that's really, really good. That just fits. You don't really have to explain that one. It passes every single nickname test that you need, and he's got a celebration that goes along with it. So I think it's Brunson. I think it's Trae Young. I think Jokic is really good in clutch situations. Obviously, you don't really think about him in that light. Darius is in that mix. So Darius has a case, there's no doubt. And Ethan just brought up those numbers, and that's one of the supporting cases, on top of the fact that the Cavs are so good in clutch situations that if you want to reward the best team in those situations and the player who is most successful in those situations, then, Darius is a really, really good choice from that standpoint.
The pushback I would have is that, like, spiritually, okay, so the Cavs have the most wins in clutch situations. They are also absolutely slobber knocking teams on a night in, night out basis. So I would say that while Darius's clutch numbers are impressive and the Cavs clutch record is impressive, I think there's a case for these teams, like more so for teams like the Kings and the Hawks, like those clutch moments for them, they swing season long outcomes, right? Like if the Hawks lose a game on a dumb buzzer beater, like the play, and then this wasn't Trae Young involved, but the play the other night where they had the turnover and Karis LeVert hit the buzzer beating layup against the Grizzlies. Like that's something that could determine whether they keep playing or not.
Right.
Whereas with Darius Garland, again, incredible clutch season. And I love, you feel so comfortable when he has his hands on the ball in the clutch, because whether he's getting a shot off or making a play for someone else, you're very confident that the right decision is going to get made. But again, for like the Cavs are going to be fine either way. There's not as much weight behind these clutch situations. Maybe we have already spent too much time analyzing this sort of made up award that has only existed for 3 years, though I think it's cool that the NBA is trying new things on this front. But that's just my 2 cents.
Just to clarify a couple of things. So the Cavs are second in clutch wins. They're 20-6. They have the best record when it comes to that. The Houston Rockets have played in 37 clutch games. They're 21-16 in those contests. And you also talk about just Darius Garland being a clutch performer. He's shooting 61.5% from deep, 59.5% from the field, as I mentioned. I just think when we talk about a guy that has his pulse on almost every aspect of the clutch game the other night, it was passing because his shot wasn't falling. He had 6 assists in the fourth quarter, helping orchestrate the offense. I think it's important to note that throughout this entire season, we've known Darius Garland to be able to take over in the fourth quarter, and that's very different from the player that he was just last year, where it felt like Darius Garland was getting played off the floor in the fourth quarter. But now he's not.
To your point, Jimmy, I think to your point about, the situations that Trae and Jalen Brunson and some of these other guys have been in, like, to put it in perspective, Darius has the efficiency numbers, but he's also taken half the shot attempts of Trae Young and Jalen Brunson in clutch situations, both from the field and from 3-point range. So that is something to consider here as well. Like, Trae's numbers from an efficiency standpoint, from a percentage standpoint, aren't as high. But when you have Jalen Brunson, I mean, he's shooting 52% from the field on 84 field goal attempts in clutch situations. Darius has 42 such attempts in clutch situations. Brunson is shooting 35% from 3-point range on double the amount of 3-point attempts as Darius. So it's fair to wonder, if Darius had more attempts, would his numbers go down? Because those are theoretically more difficult shots that you take in those kinds of situations. The defense is a little bit different, right? The pressure is a little bit higher, stuff like that. So I think the reason why, to answer the question from the very beginning, I think the reason why Jalen Brunson is considered the favorite is because he has really, really good efficiency on also high volume. And he is the guy for the New York Knicks in clutch time situations. The defense is gearing up to try and take the ball out of his hands, to try and make things difficult on him. Right? They're not loading up to slow down Mikal Bridges. They're not loading up to slow down OG Anunoby. They're trying to make things difficult on Jalen Brunson. He's seeing the best defensive player from the other team. And for him to have as many points in clutch situations as he does and shoot the percentage that he has shot both from the field and from 3-point range, it's something that is separating him, I think, a little bit from somebody like Darius, who just doesn't have as many opportunities, and he doesn't have the same kind of responsibility, I would say, in those kinds of situations because he shares a floor with Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, fair or unfair. We talked about this during All-Star voting too. Trae Young, Jalen Brunson, it's a different kind of life being those guys. I mean, I would argue part of the reason Darius has gotten the opportunities that he has this season is because other teams are like, okay, it's nut crunching time. Don't let 45 touch the ball. We don't want that guy to beat us. And there's not a ton of great options out here because the Cavs got weapons everywhere, but we'd prefer Darius to Donovan. So that's, fair or unfair. Sometimes that having good teammates on your team is used against you in a way that I don't think is fair. I think, Donovan and Jason Tatum have been taking hits in the MVP race this year just because their teams are too good. Okay, well, that's a fun conversation to have. I get the spirit of the award, but yeah, I'm not going to win the argument that they have more good players on their team if that's what we're talking about. But it's the reality of how some of these awards are measured.
The other thing to remember is that even though the Cavs are the best team in the NBA, and even though they have a chance at right around 70-ish wins, they're not going to win every single individual award. They're a great team, and it's a collective thing. But voters are going to have a hard time picking out the individual guy that separates. You know what I mean? Evan Mobley is probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year by default. But the Cavs aren't going to win every single award. They're not going to win MVP. They're not going to win Defensive Player of the Year. They're not going to win Most Improved and Clutch Player and Sixth Man of the Year and Coach of the Year. Some of these guys are going to get rewarded. There's no doubt about it. And they should get rewarded. But, when you have a great team and you're the best team in the NBA, it's more about the team than it is about the individual, if you understand where I'm going with this.
Basically, to put it pretty bluntly, the Cavs don't care about individual awards as long as they bring home the big trophy. But with all that being said, thank you for sticking with us for a fun episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. We even got into a little bit of hoops at the end there, discussing Darius Garland and his candidacy for Clutch Player of the Year. I think he's been one of the best, if not the most clutch players in the NBA this season. But we'll have to see what happens for the remainder of the season. As Chris mentioned, even though the Cavs may have clinched a spot in the playoffs by March 5th, it is still just March 5th. There's a lot of games left to play. There's a lot of things that can happen. And
a lot of milk left to be drank out there. A lot of milk to be poured up and served cold by Ty Jerome.
I never thought I would hear somebody say pouring up milk. Like, what are we? Okay. All right, Jimmy. Thank you for our closing argument, our closing segment. That'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. If you want to get a shout out on the podcast, if you want to have your questions answered, if you want to be an insider and have all the access that we do directly at your fingertips, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page to subscribe for $3.99 a month. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word stop. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who signed up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast. It's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.